Hello, welcome and good evening to one last video of the year and arguably the decade. And over the last couple of weeks I got two new toys for my Sega MegaDrive. As you can see, these are cartridges, one blank and a bit strange looking, and the other one with a label. So both of these are cartridges that allow you to put in a micro or standard SD card with ROM images to play whatever you put on there. Of course, you can use it for piracy. I mean, I've got a couple of dozen games in physical copies, but maybe switching around ROMs is easier and faster than swapping out cartridges. It reduces the wear and tear on those old machines. Or, more importantly, there are a lot of older games or rare games that you can never get a physical copy of, and maybe you want to play those. And even more important, especially to me, is you can play homebrew stuff or demos from the demo scene. Those you usually can download from the web as a ROM image and then put onto the SD card and get going. And this is more or less not practical. I mean, some homebrew games do sell cartridges, but not all of them do, and maybe they have limited runs, but usually they just give you a ROM image for download that you can play in your emulator, but now you can play it on real hardware. So the most famous cartridge that's out there for a lot of different systems, not only the Mega Drive, is the EverDrive from Krix. And this is basically the original. This is supposedly the X3 edition. I'm not sure because this is a sticker and the current logos look quite different. They have more or less this hex pattern on there. So I bought this used because, let's face it, the EverDrive is not cheap. I got this for about 30 euros, and this of course is some cheap no-name China clone for around 20 euros, so 30 euros, 20 euros, and the original X3 is, I think, at least 60 euros, the current version. So I'm not sure if the hardware is the same inside or this is somehow relabeled with a sticker, but anyway, it works, and we'll have a look at it. And what are the differences? So if you want to buy something like this, you will have to spend at least 60 euros, let's say. And the more expensive ones, the X5 and the X7, are over 100, like 80 euros and 100 euros or more than 100 euros. And there's also a different product called the Mega SD, I think, which even emulates the Mega CD extension, which these all don't. So you can't play CD images, you can't play the X32 games without having the X32 hardware. This is just for stock Mega Drive, but it's still very nice. But the question is, how much money do you want to spend, and what if you go for the cheaper options? So inside, we will open those up. We will find an FPGA on both of them, which will do, I don't know what kind of hardware emulation, maybe memory mapping chips or something like that. They will have ROMs, or like flash ROMs, or SRAMs, battery backed or whatever, that store the ROM image, because the SD card stores all the ROM images for permanent use, and then a copy gets transferred into the internal flash memory to be actually run. And this is one of the main differences, because the ROM or the flash ROM here in this cheap knockoff device is attached via a very slow serial protocol, and it takes like half a minute to a minute to swap ROMs. And here it is significantly faster. On the most modern versions, it's supposedly 2 to 4 seconds, but I'm not sure. I think this one's still a bit slower. The differences between the X3 and the higher versions, X5 and X7, You can read them up on the webpage, but it boils down to extra stuff like save states and bigger ROM images that are supported. And that's one problem with the demos, as we'll see. The demos are usually huge. They have something like 4 megabytes, 8 megabytes, so that's up to 64 megabits of ROM. And those cartridges not always support that kind of size. So yeah, let's have a look at what both variants look like, what menu they offer, and then after that we take them to bits. And the EverDrive X3 greets us with a very green screen indeed, and this is the boot up screen. And the first time you run it, it actually complains that there's no operating system missing. So you have to go to the Crix website and download the latest revision of the operating system, unzip it, and put it in the Mega folder of the SD card. And if you do that, then you will get actually this OS init screen, and it will take quite a few seconds to boot up. It's not very fast, so as you can see here, it takes the better part of half a minute until it's first time there. Then you have to reset the whole machine. At least for me, pushing a button didn't work. But after that, it gets quicker. Navigation is simple enough on both devices with the D-pad and navigating through subfolders with the A and B buttons. The parsing of the file system is significantly faster on the EverDrive. The Chinese one is very slow. Also, you have less limitations. For example, the Chinese clone only takes up to 512 files or directories per subdivision. But first let's try to run Sonic here, Sonic 1, the classic of course, and pressing the A button gives you this menu. You can take a look at the ROM configuration, the region for this ROM. You can enter some cheat codes. I've never used that. I'm not that familiar with cheating on the Sega MegaDrive. And then you can select and start the ROM. And as you can see here, it takes a couple of seconds and then you get a black screen. And after like maybe 10-15 seconds, the game will boot up. And this is not as instant as advertised on the webpage, but I blame my older revision. I guess they say 2 to 4 second loading time. That's probably true for the newer versions, but your mileage may vary. And I would love to hear feedback from people who maybe have the newer version of the X3, X5 or X7. Yeah, but other than that, Sonic runs fine. All the ROMs that I tried out weren't that many, but quite a couple. They had no problems at all running from this nice little cartridge. The Chinese clone cartridge boots up without any operating system being installed on the SD card. You can check a few details here and there for the whole cartridge and the device. You can actually run a benchmark for the attached flash memory, which will test the speed of this serial interface, the SPI interface. And it takes a couple of seconds, and you can see that it's not very quick at all. And funny enough, if you go to the About screen, it actually shows that it's made by or developed by Igor from Crix, and also support you can get via Crix.com. But it shows the no-name eBay store shop 15 something at .taobao something.com. Yeah, that's pretty weird, I think. You can update the OS, or you can also enter cheats, and I presume this is similar to the feature in the X3. There's a few more gimmicks and settings which I didn't touch, because actually everything worked so far. Yeah. But selecting a game will pass the FAT file system on the SD card, and as you can see here, it takes ages. This is so much faster on the EverDrive. So if you take one of these Chinese clones, don't put too many things on there. I downloaded one archive with I don't know how many games in there, because I didn't know what else to do. And as you can see here, it takes really a long time. But even worse, if you browse, for example, to the S subfolder, which has a lot of games and game variants, it has more than 512 entries. But the Chinese clone can actually only parse up to 512 file or directory names. So this is a very hard limitation, and you need to think carefully how to structure your SD card to make it actually work, or otherwise you see only a couple of the games that you have on there. The EverDrive X3, on the other hand, as you can see, has absolutely no problems with that. You can browse very quickly through a huge number of files, and if you have a huge collection of ROMs, then this is probably the better way to do it. Otherwise you have to make a lot of subdirectories to get over this 512 entry limitation, and that's a bit annoying. Plus, of course, the loading times of the games are significantly faster. That's definitely something to consider as well. So at the moment I would say the X3 has a few very distinct advantages that make it more worthwhile than the Chinese clone. But it's not to say that the Chinese clone doesn't work. It performs well, and if you're on a budget, it might be the thing that you want to pick up instead. The thing that interested me the most in these cartridges is being able to run Homebrew and demo software. However, as I said, the demos are usually pretty huge. They are in excess of 4 megabytes, sometimes even 8 megabytes. That is 64 megabits. And on the EverDrive, I couldn't load any of those. The website says that at least the current versions of the X3 should go up to 56 megabits. And Titan is a bit more than 3 megabytes, so that should definitely fit. But I couldn't get it to run. So that might be a limitation of my 2016 version. On the other hand, the Chinese clone here has absolutely no problem running Titan 1, at least. Titan 2 is too big with 8 megabytes, but Titan 1 definitely runs. Also some other demos. And yeah, that's a bit sad that my version can't do that. And here is also the biggest drawback, as you can see. It has to erase the flash ROM first, which takes quite a bit of time via SPI, and then it has to copy the file over. And this happens every time you switch between different cartridges, basically. And this is, of course, much slower than going in real life, fetching one cartridge, popping one out, and putting the other in. You can see here how crazy slow this is actually for EverDrive. This is simply copying 3-point-something megabytes over to a flash memory. And this should, in theory, be possible in a fraction of a second. But using a slow serial interface for doing this is, it's cheap in regards of hardware and cost for the manufacturer, but it's actually very slow for us users. But other than that, EverDrive, which is a pretty great and pretty crazy demo, works just fine. So I'll leave it running here for a couple of seconds. And on the other hand, this also doesn't mean that Homebrew and demos don't run at all on the EverDrive X3, at least in my version, if the ROM is small enough. For example, like here, it actually works. It works pretty fine. So this is definitely just a limitation of the version that I have. And yeah, hopefully the newer versions don't come with that limitation. And should be able to run all the Homebrew and demos, at least up to their specification of 56 megabits. So EverDrive 2 probably won't run, because that image is 8 megabytes, so 64 megabits. But, well, you can't have everything. And yeah, this demo is called Masiaka. Also pretty nice, a bit simpler in my opinion than EverDrive, but still full of great music and great effects. I'll also let this run for a couple of seconds before we actually take the cartridges apart. Okay, so now after you've seen what the cartridges can do and that they actually do work, let's open them up. There's only 2 screws on the back of each shell, so let's quickly undo them. Okay, first surprise of the day. The PCB here for the Mega EverDrive actually says that it's the X5. Let's zoom in a bit. It says the X5. On the cartridge it said X3. There's also a little padding thing here that's nice, which makes the PCB not rattle at all, also on the backside. So build quality seems pretty neat. And if we have a look what kind of ICs are on here, there's a bit of, that's probably, I'm guessing this should be the flash, or is there something on the back? No, this is the SD card holder, 2-sided PCB from the looks, at least 2-sided. So this is supposedly the EverDrive X5 model 16 from 2016, so 3.5 years ago. So probably the X5 was a bit different back then. Would be interesting to see a newer version. Or maybe this year it might be the flash. These are only logic chips, I don't know. We'll have to look them up. Those always say LVT 162245. Let me look that up real quick. Alright, yeah. So these are 16-bit transceivers, so that's probably for the bus interfacing. And that's about that. Up here we have another, probably a little micro, I don't know, 24FC256. Let's look that up as well. 22, what was it? 22FC256. Ah, mistyped. So that's memory, that's a 256 kilobit EEPROM. So that's probably for settings and stuff. So this here's a tiny little EEPROM. There's an oscillator or something, 50 Hertz, I think. Can't really read that. Probably 50 Hertz. And this is the FPGA. I'm not sure I can. Let's remove the QC pass sticker because we don't care about that. I want to see which FPGA is down there. It's a Lattice. It's a Lattice ICE 40HX1K. And is that the same that they advertise? I advertise a Lattice ICE 40, yeah, but that's both for the X3 and the X5. So maybe the X5 and the X3 share the same PCB. This here looks like there could be room for another memory chip, flash or whatever. And this up here, then I guess this is the real flash memory for storing the actual ROM. Okay, so that's what this looks like. Wonder what this huge pad is. Does it say something in the back? I love Sega, made in Ukraine. Yeah, okay. So this seems to be genuine. This seems to be a genuine older model of the X5 or X3. Not sure which one it actually is. Let's take a look at this one. So this is much simpler. So there's the Altera Max 2 FPGA, slightly different, which corresponds to the EverDrive V3, which is the little brother of the X series. And it has the same drawbacks as the V3, this board here, the slow and limited rewrite of everything. So maybe this isn't even flash. Maybe this is just some RAM chip, because the X3 and X5 have unlimited rewrites, so that should be some regular RAM, SRAM probably, or I don't know. And this here's the flash chip here. It's ST, so SGS Thompson, I think, labeled M29W64 something. Well, yeah, that's just fine. This is, I think, the reset switch or something. No, this is the pause button for the Sega Master System, because these can also emulate the Sega Master System. And on the back here, this is probably 72nd, probably the ROM. Maybe this is some... let's look it up. FM1808. What's FM1808? That's a FRAM. What the deuce is FRAM? 256 kilobit FRAM. It's probably similar to ferroelectric non-volatile RAM. Okay, so this is like the EEPROM on the other thing, for settings and other stuff. Yeah, all right, so that's pretty neat. Zoom in a bit. So we have two very different boards. This is, the cheap knockoff is akin to the EverDrive V3 with flash memory and limited rewrite cycles, but that's like in the 100,000 errors, so probably good enough for many people. But it's of course much slower because you have to copy it via the serial link. It takes the standard SD cards, which is not a big problem because you can just use an adapter. And this here is the X3/X5, which, yeah, in my revision doesn't take the very large ROM images. This one takes a bit larger ROM images, but the most recent release says, at least advertises 56 megabit compatibility. So Titan EverDrive 2 will not run on the X5 and X7, but EverDrive 1 should run. And it definitely runs on this cheap Chinese knockoff. One more thing that I noticed is, I'm not sure why, because the dimensions look very similar. So we have chamfered edge here, and this is chamfered all around. But I couldn't get the cheap Chinese knockoff to fit into the Mega Drive at first try. I had to push it in and remove it a couple of times. It was a very tight fit. This is more or less like a fraction of a millimeter too thick or too wide. I don't know. It looks okay. So yeah, the build quality is definitely better on the Mega EverDrive, that's for sure. But the question is now, do you want to afford spending 60 to 120 euros on something like this? Or are you good enough with a cheap knockoff? Yeah, I hope this helped you in making a decision. I'm, for now, gonna keep both of them. Let's see which one I'll use more. It's definitely nice that the switching time between ROMs is faster on the Mega EverDrive, but it's also nice that I can use bigger ROMs on the cheap knockoff. So maybe this will become my demo cartridge for just showing off EverDrive, because it won't run on my X3 version. And yeah, other than that, that's it for today. I hope this was informative. If so, please do hit the subscribe button. Leave a like or dislike, put a comment in the comment section. Do you have one of these? Do you have maybe the newer versions? Do you have the Mega SD? What do you think of it? And I hope you have a wonderful New Year's Eve and a great year 2020. So let's hope we'll see you again next year.